Welcome to Doom Debates. Today I've got two special guests debating pro versus anti the SB 1047 bill. On the pro side, we've got Holly Elmore, who represents the PauseAI organization, which I'm actually part of myself. I support PauseAI. And on the other side, debating anti-SB 1047, we've got Palo Alto City Councilmember Greg Tanaka. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Lauren.
Let's kick it off with opening statements. Both of you, I want to hear a little background, so introduce yourself and give us an overview of your position on SB 1047. Let's start with Greg.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been serving on the Palo Alto City Council for about 7.5 years. I've also been in the technology space for some time. I'm actually in the AI space, so I'm an entrepreneur in the space. And I think SB 1047 has a lot of good intentions, but I think it's fundamentally flawed. I think it's basically a solution looking for a problem. There's been a lot of sci-fi out there with Terminator and things like that. And I think that's been the inspiration for this bill is all the sci-fi fantasies that people like have nightmares about. But the reality is that SB 1047 is trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. My dad, when he retired, he was a Hollywood extra and he was in ER and Austin Powers and a bunch of different movies and TV shows. And one of the movies he was in was a movie called Minority Report. And basically 1047 is like the Minority Report, where it's basically in this movie, if you guys haven't seen it, a movie about precogs, where basically these people will predict future crimes and you'll get arrested before you even committed the crime. And SB 1047 like that. It's forecasting a Terminator like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator like future where all these people in Hollywood who have no clue about AI dreamed up possible nightmare scenarios so that people go buy tickets. And it's like a precog moment where they're basically trying to predict that AI is going to cause irreparable damage to society. And so it needs to be nipped in the bud even before it's done anything. And so it's a total disaster. It's a train wreck. It's something that could be stopped immediately. And I'm shocked that in the Senate passed, I think, 33 or 34 to 1 or something like that. It flew through the Senate. It's probably going to pass through the Assembly as well, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that cooler minds will prevail and better legislation will be set forth.
Great. Okay, Holly, your background and opening statement in favor of SB 1047.
So I'm Holly Elmore, and I'm the executive director of the grassroots organization PauseAI US. And we're concerned about harms from superintelligent AI and even the potential for extinction from superintelligent AI. So the scenarios that you're talking about, that's what we're concerned about. But it's not just us. Sam Altman, Geoffrey Hinton, Elon Musk, hundreds of other industry leaders signed a letter last April asking for a shorter pause. We're asking for an indefinite pause because they recognize this danger. And we're concerned that we're not going to have the chance to wait until AI has done something to do something about AI. So we're very proactive and we're strongly in support of SB 1047 as a start to the sort of regulation that we need to make sure that AI innovation happens safely.
Great. Thanks, Holly. To kick it off, I think we can get a shared reality on just the basic facts. So let's go over the basic facts. I've copied a summarization from Zvi Moshowitz, who writes a really good weekly overview of all the AI news. So we're going to go point by point, and I'll just read it out and explain it, and then I'll just check with both of you that I'm accurately representing what's even in the bill that we're here debating. The first point that is maybe the most important is just this idea that the bill is trying to have a relatively light touch and only go after the larger players. Specifically, it's saying if you don't train a model with $100 million worth of compute and you don't fine-tune a $100 million model with 10 million in compute, so if you're not spending vast amounts of money on training or fine-tuning, then this law doesn't apply to you. Would you agree?
Yes.
I think the issue, though, is there's this arbitrary limit of 10 to 26. And there's been, I think the last amendment was August 22nd, right? Maybe there's a later one, I don't know. But I think August 22nd is the one I was looking at. And I don't know if you guys know, but a lot of these models are derivations of each other. So, like, for instance, like Llama 3, 3.1, I think was 15 trillion tokens and a bunch of compute, I forgot how much. But what happens is people do a lot of fine tuning on top of it. That 10 to 26 does it start with the foundation model? And there's multiple fine tunes that people do on these models. So we're like So for like my startup, we do fine tuning too. So let's say we use a model that is at 10, 20, and 26, and we fine tune on top of it. Does that mean we're also liable? Do we also have to be worried about that?
If you're just a startup and you're just trying to fine tune and you're doing a few rounds and you've raised a couple $1 million, it should be impossible for you to go under this bill, if I understand correctly, right? Because the bill is very clear. You have to spend 10 million plus on your fine tuning project for this to even apply.
My last startup was not a large company. We didn't raise a lot of money, but if you look at the cost to fine tune, it's pretty expensive, right? You have to rent a bunch of H100s. And my last startup, we easily $500,000 bill a month is not unusual, right? To fine tune. It is definitely within reason. So, I mean, you look at all the startups out there, they could spend easily spend in a year, perhaps even more, $10 million, right? And so over the lifetime
So
of the
that's a
startup.
startup that doesn't have much funding. They can spend $10 million.
I'm talking about
fine
venture-backed
tuning.
startup. If you're talking about the garage, not. But even then, right now, 10 to 26 seems like a lot. Way back when, maybe 20 years ago or so, there used to be this idea that encryption is munitions. I'm not sure if you guys heard about this, but so if you had strong encryption, it was basically equivalent to a bomb, and it was illegal to have powerful encryption. But thankfully, they got rid of it, because if they kept it, basically what would happen is, even this conversation which is happening through encryption, Gmail, your bank account, everything you use on the internet would be impossible. And people thought, oh, this encryption limit is something that no one would ever be able to do. But I'll tell you, my wristwatch does encryption more powerful than that law. So that law set back, I think it was in the 70s when it was set. People said, oh, there's no way people would have to hit it. Only state actors would be able to hit this encryption limit. But today, my wristwatch has encryption more powerful than that. And people, if you said, oh yeah, this encryption is munitions, people would think you're bonkers, right? Makes no sense. So 1026 today seems like a lot, but if you look at the curves, GPU power is going up exponentially. So it doesn't take much more to hit that 1026. I'm talking about 5 to 10 years. That 1026.
So I just checked the bill summary. We can have the argument about flops, but it looks like it's a minimum requirement that you have to spend 10 million. So even if it becomes really cheap to have a lot of flops, it's an essential requirement. So I just wanted to clarify this.
Inflation, like since COVID, right? I think the dollar's worth like 30-40% less. So yeah, $10 million seems like a lot now, but with the rate of inflation, it'd be $5 million in a few years. In a few more years, it's maybe $2 million. In a few more years, it's worth $1 million, right?
I will point out that
I used to buy
capabilities will
Palo
also increase with more flops. So maybe we should be looking at machines that powerful. Like, it's not arbitrary. It's not something that just continues to be harder for business only. Because they're making more powerful technology.
And guys, before we debate too much, I actually just want to go back to just establishing the basic fact. So what I originally went over was that this bill requires you to have $100 million in compute spent, essentially being a large company if to be eligible for being regulated as somebody who's created a non-derivative model. So that's pretty high threshold there, $100 million. And then there was also a $10 million minimum threshold if you become eligible for having responsibility for fine-tuning a model.
Just going back to the encryption example, if you had strong encryption, it's munitions, it's illegal, right? And you could be set to the gulag for having encryption that's too strong, right? And it was such a ridiculous bill or law that basically by the early 90s, everyone violated the law. And pretty much like every single electronic device like PS, anything with the S for HTTP, uses encryption stronger than that. 10 to 26 seems like a lot, but it's not a lot in a few years. So that encryption bill, I think it was only like 7 years or 8 years after it got enacted. Pretty much every device started exceeding it because you guys heard of Moore's law, right? It goes exponential. It's not a linear. The harm of it is that, let's say if we didn't have encryption, basically you couldn't buy stuff on Amazon. So what happens as a result is that it could also be used for political purposes. If they don't like you, then they can come down hard on you. But basically, if you use powerful encryption, which is like HTTPS, then basically you could be locked up. You could be fined. You could be taken down. And so it's America's supposed to be the country of the free, right? It's not supposed to be the country of the state controls everything, right?
So I've skimmed through Svi's summary again, and I think I have some ground truth here on what happened. So Originally, we were talking about 10 to the 26 flops. We were trying to, the regulators were trying to find a threshold over how they're going to make the bill apply. And 10 to the 26 was controversial, and Greg spells out some reasons why it's controversial. So what happened was they layered on the additional requirement, the $100 million requirement. So yes, the 10 to the 26 is still in there, but you have to also spend 10 to the 20. So if you if you don't like 10 to the 26, it doesn't really matter because most people agree that 100 million is the main threshold that's in the bill right now. How about we agree on all the facts and then I'll call on you and you can talk about inflation and make the point you want to make, okay? All right. To summarize the bill, it only applies to companies that spend 100 million plus to train an AI model, or to companies that spend $10 million plus to fine tune one of these large models. Companies that don't spend that much money to build or fine tune a model, they won't even be covered by this bill. Do you guys agree that's what the bill says?
There's a lot of ambiguity here, right? Because fine tuning, there's lots of steps involved.
Does it say fine tuning though? Or
So what does fine tuning
Yes.
mean? So what does fine tuning mean? Fine tuning, does that mean you're acquiring the data? Does that mean that you clean the data? Does that mean you're verifying the data? Does that mean you're setting up all the computer verification environment? Does it mean, like, what does fine tuning and enter?
It's a good question, but the bill talks in terms of fine tuning, I think. Right?
I know, but it's very ambiguous as to what fine tuning means.
do we agree it talks in terms of fine tuning? We're just establishing what we do agree that it says. And then we can have these conversations.
Even within my own company, if we talk about fine tuning, I think it's not so clear where does that fine tuning begin and end. And it's because it's unclear, it's hard to know when do you hit that 10 million.
Yeah, it's a good point. But like Holly's saying, I just want to separate going over what the bill says with going over why you think it's unclear and why you're objecting to it, okay?
Because a big cost of fine tuning is actually acquiring the data, getting that data set. That's like it's a huge amount of the cost is actually just getting the data, right? Probably 90% of their budget is actually spent getting that data. And then you're spending a bunch more money, right? So the whole fine tuning process is actually pretty expensive.
Why shouldn't you include the data? I think we should just be focusing on the facts here, but why the data makes it a more powerful, it makes it better, right? It increases the abilities of the model. Right?
I would argue that the limit here could already be hit today by a lot of companies. You start, depending on how fine tuning is defined, right?
But we agree that the bill says that the limit is $10 million spent on something we call fine tuning.
And
that would be the threshold.
10 to 25 integer or floating point operations. But in operation, there's like A plus B, and then there's doing integral. Those are both operations. So which one are we talking about here? Are we talking about convolution? Are we talking about an adder, right? So that's also very ambiguous.
All laws tend to require some interpretation, and we do manage to do that.
If you look at some operations, they could be 1,000 times different, right? 3 orders of magnitude different easily, right? Or more.
Okay, let's just go over the other points. All right, so in addition to the $100 million and $10 million thresholds, there's language about critical harm, defining it as 500 million plus in damages from related incidents or mass casualties. So the bill is going to be regulating these kinds of critical harms. Specifically, it says if you train a model with $100 million or more in compute, you need to have a reasonable written plan. You need to have a safety and security protocol for preventing unreasonable risk of critical harms, which is, remember, 500 million in damages or mass casualties. You need to have this written plan for preventing unreasonable risk of critical harms, follow it and publish it with redactions and your safety test results. So that's what the bill says, correct?
Roughly, yeah. So by the way, I looked
Okay,
up if the definition of fine tuning was in here. They actually have a definition of fine tuning.
Right.
But when I look at it, it's incredibly ambiguous, right? It's the scope. It says, okay, the fine tuning is literally just one sentence, right? Which, if you talk to anyone that does fine tuning, it's hard to find it in one sentence because it means so many different things to so many different people. It says fine tuning means adjusting the model weight of a covered model or covered model derivative by exposing it to additional data. My God, where does that begin and end? You could argue like everything is involved in
Is it a
fine-tuning or
problem that it's
nothingness.
unclear who's covered by the law, or is it that you don't want people to be covered by the law? Because they seem like two different issues, right? Would you be happy if the threshold were higher?
this is
Would
an
you be
example of
happy if
bad
it were
law.
clearer? Or it seems like you don't want there to be
The
this
problem is,
law.
so I'm a lawmaker myself on council, and what's really important when we make laws is that they're clear. Because if the laws aren't clear, like we have this crazy law in Palo Alto about you can't idle your car. Do you know how many times we've actually enforced the law of not idling a car? 0 times. It's been around for 6 years now. We've never ever enforced it once because it's such a freaking bad law. Like, you can't enforce it, right? And so we have this thing here on section J here for fine tuning. This definition of fine tuning is crazy ambiguous. Nobody's going to know.
Okay.
You can never really enforce it.
Okay.
You don't know what it is.
All right, let me just get the other facts out. I'm almost done. Okay, just saying what the bill says. Okay, it says, if you fail to take reasonable care, meaning a serious effort at writing and following one of these safety and security protocols, and you're one of these $100 million plus companies training this large model, then there may be an injunction to stop you. And if you furthermore cause critical harms, 500 million plus, or mass casualties, then there's also a fine. Okay, is that a good characterization of what the bill says?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay, great. Almost done. Next thing, whistleblowers.
Did they get rid of the criminal liability? I think I saw that, or is it still there?
They don't require the compliance officer to swear under oath that the safety plan is thorough or something like that. Now they just have to affirm it.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So that was
Okay.
the only possible criminal penalty that people could have been referring to.
Yeah.
All right, last couple points, almost done. Whistleblowers get protections if they expose a potentially dangerous model, even before it causes critical harm. Employers can't block employees from reporting to the Attorney General or the Labor Commissioner for these kind of whistleblower scenarios. And finally, compute clusters must do Know Your Customer, KYC, on sufficiently large customers. Okay, that's all I got in my high-level summary. Does anybody think that my high-level summary is factually inaccurate, or can we start going into objections?
I think there's a lot of, and one of the biggest issues with this bill is that it's incredibly ambiguous. So from the definitions, from what is a plan, I think it's throwing mud on the windshield. Can't see where you're going, right? It's written by someone that doesn't really know what they're doing. That's the problem.
Okay, let me ask you guys this, to understand your viewpoints better. What is your dream scenario for SB 1047 and any subsequent regulations? Like, how do you see a good regulation roadmap? So I'll start with Holly.
My dream is that this is the first layer. This is very light touch regulation, very high ceiling for harm that it's trying to prevent. And then from here, we're able to get the level of regulation that we need to move forward safely with AI. I want to see AGI and powerful AI continue to be developed, but I want to do it only if we know it's safe. And we can only do that with real external regulation, not the AI companies grading their own homework, but external regulators that they are accountable to coming in and monitoring their progress and having recourse if they're doing something dangerous or if something happens. Real full participation of both the government and the AI companies in building these models safely. That would be my dream.
How about you, Greg? Ideal regulation roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, my ideal regulation roadmap for SB 1047 is that it goes down in flames, that it doesn't pass assembly, or hopefully the governor vetoes it. I kind of view SB 1047 as like a padded cell for a sedated toddler, right? It's basically going to kill all innovation in California. And California, unfortunately, tends to lead the country. So probably the rest of the state's going to adopt California. And what it's going to do is going to push out all the AI companies like mine and others to somewhere else.
Would you leave?
Yeah.
I want to know what you would do.
I would leave, yeah, sure. We would have to move.
You'll leave California?
Yeah, we would have to move.
You could stop being a councilman?
Oh, I'm almost.
You'll change your residency, or
I would probably have to change profession. Yeah, because there'll be significant liability. Yes, have to.
Okay,
so
that's a strong statement, Greg.
I'll see
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
doing that.
It's a disaster. So if you look at who's opposing it, they have this ledge tracker thing, right? You look at all the people opposed, it's something like 9 out of 10 people. If you look at
Where?
on the ledge tracker website, I can send it to you later.
Wait, which people oppose it? Which
It
population is this?
talks about who's opposing and who's supporting and opposing.
77% of Californians are in favor of actually the strong form of the bill from before the amendments.
I think most Californians have no idea what's going on. But if you look,
when you give them an explainer of what's in the bill,
look at the
they're
comments
77% in favor of it.
55%
55% strongly in favor.
Well, they haven't written in then. But if you look at people who wrote in, vastly opposed. Like 95%.
I think
5%.
People who have written in. Where is this tracker of people who have written in?
Oh, it's where I could send it to you. I don't have it right now, but I can send it to you. But basically, it has all the people who opposed it. I'm on there too. So you can see all the people who've supported and opposed it. And basically everyone that written in.
So these are like people, just constituents or?
Constituents, yeah.
Or, okay.
And Greg,
There are
just to
well-funded
repeat,
campaigns against it, but when you poll just Californians, 77% are in favor, 55%.
I think 77% of Californians would think that they don't want Terminator to happen. But anyone that's involved in this technology, if I could just,
Even tech workers were majority in favor in that poll.
I think if I could just get ChatGPT to properly edit an email, I'd be happy, right? Let alone take over the world. It's so far from taking over the world. But there's this Hollywood thing going on, this Hollywood trope that's going to take over the world and kill everyone.
So your argument is that AI is just not that good?
It's like, it's barely getting started right now. There's so many different things that we're trying to get it to do, and it's barely getting started. And yet people, it's like this. It's like the Wright brothers just got the airplane going, and then we're worried about someone's going to not have enough oxygen in space.
Do you think there are
starting.
genuine safety concerns about flight?
So should we kill the aerospace industry when the Wright brothers started flying?
Did it kill the aerospace industry?
They didn't have SB
It's our
1047.
most successful
They didn't have
example of
SB
regulatory
1047.
agency.
There was nothing crazy like SB 1047. SB 1047 is basically the precogs, basically saying that because one day an airplane might fly into the Twin Towers, we should ban airplanes. That's crazy. There was no law like that. SB 1047.
Greg, I want to clarify, is there any regulatory roadmap that you would support, or are you just very much kill all regulation in the whole space?
Well, I think if it's used for harm, that's one thing. What the problem with SB 1047 is that it's Hollywood inspired. It's inspired by Minority Report. It's inspired by Terminator. It's inspired by things that are totally fanciful and are not rooted in reality. It's basically trying to have someone predict the future. If you get the future wrong, you're screwed. And that's
So
an
are
impossible.
Geoffrey Hinton
that's
and
an
Yoshua
impossible-
Bengio, they are just basing their opinion on sci-fi, you think?
What'd you say?
All right, Geoffrey Hinton and Yoshua Bengio, do you just think they're basing their opinion on sci-fi?
Basically, yeah, it's fears, right? It's fears that there's been no proven harm. So let's think about this.
They're the most respected experts in machine learning.
There's a lot of respected experts.
There's a lot of respected experts and
So
ones
the-
who
the-
what
the
signed
analogy-
the
the
case
analogy that's
statement.
going on right now is, so way back when the printing press was invented, the Ottoman Empire thought it was not good because it basically spread knowledge and put a bunch of people who know how to write, they call them Cleves, out of business. And so they banned the printing press. And what that led to was, in Europe, the printing press went everywhere, and that led to the Renaissance. And in the Ottoman Empire, nobody's heard of them anymore, right? They gone away. And there's never been a time in humanity when more intelligence, more knowledge was evil. Anytime there's been more knowledge, more intelligence, the productivity of people increased, the freedom of people increased, the living standards increased. There's never been a time, except for now when they're trying to ban, this is trying to basically allow people to become smarter with these better models. This is basically trying to push us into dark ages, right? This part is trying to turn us, California, the United States, into the Ottoman Empire. It is craziness, right? It's on a Hollywood fear that's not proven in reality at all. So
Are there any real?
It's totally
Okay.
bonkers.
Sorry.
I'm curious if you think there's any technology or any path that we could take that would be dangerous to us.
When there's a danger, then let's address it. There's already laws against using to spook people. There's already laws against using it for harm. Let's just use those laws. This one here is exceptional law because this law is basically forcing someone to predict the harm, right? You have to be a precon. Minority Report is a fictional film that my dad was an extra in. It is not reality. It is not possible to predict the future. And you
Hey, Greg, I want to drill down more into your nightmare scenario here because, yeah, you're using strong language like this is bad for innovation. It's
It is
putting
bad.
California down.
It's not.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So I just want to drill down into your nightmare scenario. And specifically, if I heard correctly, you mentioned that you would literally move out of the state of California.
Well, not
if
just
this
me. A bunch of
passes.
people move out, right? So Elon Musk already moved XAI out.
I would bet you right now, I'd be happy to put down money on whether you'll leave California if this bill passes.
So just, do you want to reiterate that you will literally move out of California if this passes? It's that bad? And if so, then can you just go into detail of what you're expecting?
Well, I think people would have to change professions. That's what it means, right? It means that if you did want to leave California, you would have to do something different, right? You would have to not train models, right? You would have to not.
Do you think that AI training would not continue in California?
No, it would not.
The employees live here, their families are here. You don't think that would be a greater cost? You think the cost will exceed the cost of changing states?
This is an extreme enough bill that I think the AI industry in California would be toast, right? I think Anthropic, OpenAI, Meta.
But Anthropic supports the bill.
Mildly. I think didn't OpenAI also oppose it? I think
OpenAI came out against it, a couple of days ago, and Anthropic said that they thought that it would be a feasible burden for them.
Yeah, I think so. This is what they also call regulatory capture. So the leaders, they actually want regulation because basically they could put a wall around their business and they could have
So
armed
how do you
lawyers.
explain OpenAI then? Or
Sorry,
OpenAI don't
Holly,
want to
sorry,
don't want
Holly,
regulatory capture?
Maybe I'll talk when you talk because I can't hear your question when I'm talking.
Okay, go ahead, Greg.
Okay, so so I think that by pushing Anthropic first, they're one of the leaders right now. By pushing for this regulation, they basically put up a wall. They put a moat around their business. They raise billions of dollars, maybe, I don't know, 50 billion, some crazy amount of money. And so for them to hire army of lawyers to do a bunch of paperwork, no big sweat. But little startups, forget about it, right? If you're academic research, forget about it, right? You don't have time to do all this paperwork, right? You need to hire like lawyers who are charging like $2,000, $5,000 per hour. There's just no way. And so
it sounds like you're having it a lot of ways. You're saying that the big competitors, although the big guys would leave because it's so onerous, but also they want to make a moat around themselves. And so they want the bill to pass for that reason. I don't know. It's just not consistent.
no, those two things could be consistent, both be true, right? They
How
could
do
want
you-
it.
so
They could
you're
they could
saying
want
Anthropic wants-
so it's natural. Like you look at tobacco industry, you look at just about any like business, like a lot of insurance, they push for like regulations because basically it keeps out startups, right? It cuts them down because the startups can't afford the regulation. So yes, big companies want that. And with big companies, with AI companies move out, yes, Elon Musk, it's really after 1047 started, he decided to put out XAI, right? One of the preeminent AI companies in California. So yeah, absolutely. Both could be. Why do you think that's not
Okay.
good? It's already happening.
Right.
There's so many other industries where there's been regulatory capture, right? Where these guys.
It just
millions on
but it
donations,
seems like the story
right?
changes on the fly.
No.
I say actually Anthropic supports it. You say, oh, then it's regulatory capture.
But yeah,
You know,
so the big guys are pushing for
okay. So
regulatory
if they
capture.
do, if
And
they
they're
don't
all
support it,
coming
it's because it's going to be
Well, both
economically
are
onerous to
happening.
them.
Both are happening. Companies are moving out, and it's regulatory capture. Yes, both are, and both are happening right now. And both is and regulatory capture has happened for so many different industries. Telecom. You look at tobacco, right? Definitely, all happen.
So, Greg, how does regulatory capture explain why OpenAI opposes it while Anthropic supports it?
So I think it depends on who they think the leader is. So if you look at the leaderboard right now, Claude, Sonnet 3.5 is actually top of the leaderboard, right? And it's been a top. Depending on which leaderboard you look at, it's near the top. I think OpenAI, they've been talking about GP5 forever. It hasn't come out yet. And Anthropic has gained a lot of OpenAI employees. And so Anthropic feels like they're king of the hill right now. They feel like it's okay for them. I don't know. I haven't talked to these guys
Really,
directly.
but OpenAI doesn't have the money to also benefit from a regular. They're number two, if by any means, maybe like they're pretty much neck and neck.
What you guys should do is invite Sam Altman and talk to him. I don't know. I haven't talked to him, but I can only speculate. But I know he's been pushing for regulation. Sam Altman's been pushing for regulation. But this regulation is the fundamental problem with this regulation is it's the minority report. It's a precog of laws, right? It's the only law we have to forecast. The forecast.
That's not true. All negligence laws are about forecasting harm. All laws to do with negligence are about the expectation of harm.
We take turns talking. Okay? Do you want to talk, and then I'll speak quiet and let you talk? Or
Yeah, I should get to talk some
So we both talk. I can't respond to you when you talk, so we gotta take turns.
Okay, so I think Greg pushed back and he said not all laws are predicting the future of negligence. Sorry, Greg, did you finish your question?
No, I was interrupted, but I could keep
Okay.
going. Or if Holly wants to talk, you could talk now.
Yeah, I was saying all liability laws are about, all laws concerning negligence are about the expectation of harm.
Okay, do you want me to
So
respond?
this is not the only law that's asking people to predict whether something they do will cause harm.
Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, this is the only law that you have to, if you're liable for unforeseen damages. The problem with most of the other laws, there was evidence. The reason why the law was there was because someone defrauded someone, someone raped someone, someone murdered someone. So people know it's a bad thing. And so there's a law for it because there's a bunch of ground truth, right? There's a bunch of instances that have happened, hijacking, right? There's a bunch of things that have happened where there's known reasons why you want a law against it. This one here is totally different. This one here is open-ended. It's basically, basically, I said, it's like the Minority Report, it's the precog of laws, right? And so that's why it's crazy ridiculous, because essentially, basically, you're asking someone to forecast future harm, and it's bonkers, right? It's not
bonkers.
Okay, so
That's what liability is.
We
Liability
could talk
is
over each other.
whatever happens, you're responsible.
How do you want to do it?
There's different standards of liability, but this is what liability is. You can't just
Should we
say
take
like,
turns,
well,
or
I
should we
didn't know
talk over
something
each
was
other?
going to go
How
wrong.
do we want to do it there?
Holly, is there another comparable example to what Greg is saying where the exact type of harm caused had never happened at the
Well, that's
time that
the
the regulation
entire-
was made?
Sorry, the entire standard of strict liability is about that. It's about unforeseen. So no matter what happens, unforeseen harms, that's on the manufacturer. Like they have to foresee it or they take responsibility for what happened. There's an entire standard in tort law of liability that means that. So it's not true that there aren't other laws like this.
Yeah, okay. So I guess you're saying like if you make a product and we don't know all the ways the product can harm the consumer, but we ask the manufacturer to take responsibility for any type of harm. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what, in this case, if you have strict liability, that's what it means. If something goes wrong, it's on you.
Okay.
So let me
related,
respond to that. So Holly, can you tell me of another technology where basically you have to forecast and you have to be liable for all future harm of that technology? Can you tell me an example of another one where there's a law like that, where it's a precog type law?
You probably don't think of it as like technology, but like there's a lot of things that have to be precisely manufactured to be safe.
No, I'm talking about technology. This is not a product. This is not a product law. This is a technology law.
How do you define technology then?
Look how they define it here, right? So it's basically any model. It's any model, right? That's a very broad thing. That's not a product.
So when you say tech, like condoms have to be manufactured to a very high specification. And they have to, there's a defined amount of failure that's acceptable.
So Holly, so the analogy here would be that the designer of the original condom and maybe 5 designers down who took derivations of each other, like the whole chain of people are all liable. That's what not the manufacturer, the designer, because that's what this is saying, right? Because these are just, they're not physical products.
A good example would be something like weapons. Like if you're making weapons and they're supposed to have certain safety so they don't go off.
That's not a technology.
That's not a technology?
No.
How? In what world is a weapon not a technology?
What is it like? That's not what I think about. That's not what I think of a technology. I can't think of another technology out there where you have to forecast the future on.
It sounds like you don't think a lot of things are technologies. What do you mean, software?
Yeah,
protected by its terms of service and how it's deployed. But for instance,
is there another law in place that has a precog like thing like this 1047 does?
You reject any action. I give you examples of how this is what liability law is, and tech has been an exception for too long. And you say it's not legitimate or it's not a real example of tech, or the fact that there aren't laws proves that there shouldn't be laws or something like that. When the real reason there aren't laws is because there just hasn't been enough time.
It seems like you can't cite a law that's analogous to 1047.
Can you tell me what a technology is? Then I'll tell you a law.
Technology is innovation. Technology is how to make someone more productive. That's what it is.
How is a weapon not an innovation?
It's an idea. It's not a tangible product.
Technology is ideas. Okay.
It sounds like Holly's saying that we want to look to examples of how we regulate bombs or nukes. We want to look to that industry for examples. And then Greg is saying we should look to the consumer technology industry where we don't have that same level of strict regulation. And it's in the middle of these two.
So it's like bombs, like a nuclear bomb, right? Killed millions of people. There's some real clear evidence that there's harm there, right? How many people have AI killed? How many people have AI killed?
I mean, arguable.
How many lives have it saved, right? Right now, I think I saw Google came out with AlphaFold, right? Think about all the new drugs that we discovered. Think about all the people who have cancer that will be...
Think about the bioweapons that can be developed now in the wrong hands. These are dual-use technologies.
Bioweapons can be developed even without AI.
So can drugs, just not as easily.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. You took credit for it when it was like a drug. It's also, you have to take credit for the
with everything, with everything, there's always a potential harm and a potential benefit. And AI, it's 99% benefit and 1% harm, potential harm.
You're just asserting that. We don't know.
I
Let's
think
try
with,
to
I
I
think with a
that
bomb,
I hope
I
that
think
we
with a
can
bomb, it's
develop
not
that is
only
the
the other
case.
way around.
Let's try to be a little bit more concrete about hypothetical scenarios. I want to do it both ways. So with Holly, I want to ask, can you be more specific about a future world, which is your nightmare world if we don't have a regulation like SB 1047? And then afterwards, I'll ask Greg, what's a specific nightmare scenario where you have to leave California because it's just so bad with all this regulation, like specifically you're trying to do something and it doesn't work. So I want to ask both of you about your nightmares, starting with Holly.
I mean, my nightmare world is something where there isn't the incentive to do the proper safety testing, to have the proper safety planning. There's not the accountability to proceed safely. And we take a look at how much destruction computer viruses have already caused. Like some lines of code, like they can cause millions of dollars in damage. Maybe some have caused billions of dollars in damage. Now imagine that virus is intelligent and it has a goal that it's trying to reach with that. Just the destruction could be huge. And so the nightmare scenario for me is that we don't start now with making sure that these dangerous possibilities aren't nipped in the bud, so that the positive, we can get to that world where it's 99 to 1 benefit. But that doesn't just happen by accident. These are all use technologies. We're talking about developing general intelligence, like the ability to achieve goal states flexibly, open-endedly. That could mean lots of different world states we have to think about. So we want to make sure that we're only moving toward the things that are good for us. I want innovation, but I want us to not accidentally go fast and go in the wrong direction. That would be my nightmare.
Greg, what do you think of Holly's nightmare scenario? And then tell us your nightmare scenario.
Yeah, well, I think the fundamental thing she's missing here is that there's already laws about the things she talked about. Like, so if someone uses a virus or a virus is used to destroy a bunch of computers, there's already laws about that. We already have laws to cover for the scenario she just actually talked about. My nightmare scenario is that California today is the epicenter of AI. If you look at all the amazing models that come out, it's all come from California. And Silicon Valley, if you look at the S&P 500, a big chunk of the S&P 500 comes from companies that didn't exist 50 years ago, right? These are new companies. These are new innovations. So many people are employed, so much wealth, so much prosperity has happened in California, and as a result of technology. And to me, the nightmare scenario is that California becomes like the Ottoman Empire, right? That basically becomes all the cutting edge innovation is done outside somewhere else. And in California, basically, we're left to be a wasteland, right? After that, maybe we have to use AI.
Can you be a little bit more specific about the scenario, though?
So basically,
your company trying to do what?
Basically, I think California is fifth or sixth largest economy, something like that. If it was its own country, we would collapse, right? We would become, and maybe some people want that, right? But I don't, right? I like the weather, actually. So
I get I think that's representative of the anti-SB 1047 position. Like, I get preserving innovation and being competitive with other states. I get that, but can you just make it more specific, right? So let's say you work for Meta or you work for a startup. Like, what day-to-day life are you imagining here?
So you can imagine, like, if you work for XAI, basically you're calling real estate agents in Texas, right? Because it's moving out of California. So it's just
okay, but what is it that's making them move? Before they decide to move, what are they trying to do that they can't?
If you have laws like this, which are really ambiguous, incredibly punitive, incredibly misguided, basically it forces people to move, right? You have to move. And one thing about the world today is that people are a lot more mobile than before.
What forces them to move, though? Why do they want to move?
Can I finish? Should I address her?
You are evading the question again. Can you
I did want to ask the same thing of just, can you just make it as specific as possible? Because when I asked Holly the question, she did specifically mention the example of an overpowered virus, and I think that helped make the conversation more specific. So I want to make it specific on the other side of, okay, these companies want to move because what's an example of something that they tried to do?
Why would they move?
Because before moving, they had a specific plan that they wanted to do that they felt like they couldn't. So what's an example of such a plan?
Is there an expiration date on this law? But as far as I can tell, this thing goes on forever. So it's mutual harm. It's not just 1 year from now. There's not like a statute of limitations I know of. It's like
I don't think it expires. Yeah.
So that's the problem, right? So you're on the hook forever, and that's the problem.
Can we make it specific? All right. Can we just go through one scenario? Right? Because that's my exercise here, is asking you for scenarios.
I just told you one.
So the scenario is that they want to move because they're confused, but
No, not confused,
just
because
flesh
there's
out-
unlimited liability forever for a future thing that is ill-defined.
when they're reasoning through this decision, I get what you're saying. I think it's a valid point. I just would like to play it out in more specific details. So what would be an example? Maybe I can help you out. So maybe they want to release their next open source model and they don't feel like they have enough guarantees of safety and they want to do it anyway. And now they feel like they can't. Is that a good scenario?
Sure, that's the one. But there's many others.
Okay, so let's discuss that scenario though, because I guess I'll put the question to you. If Meta wants to release Llama 4 or Llama 5 and it's open sourced and they don't feel like they can write a convincing reason why it's definitely going to be safe, then is it a good thing to just let them release it anyway?
I think what will happen is, I think Zuckerberg has done a really great benefit to humanity by releasing Llama 3 and all the other Llama models. I think what will happen if this law passes is that they will probably stop doing that, or they'll try to move the development out of California. One of those two things will happen. And I think humanity is going to lose as a result. I think we'll be less smart. I think there'll be less innovation. I think there'll be less cure to cancer. I think there'll be more misery in the world. And so that's not what I want.
What do you think about that scenario, Holly?
Which part? I guess that whole. Yeah,
Like that, future version of Llama where Meta doesn't feel like it can write a what was it called, an SSP.
SSP.
They
Yes.
don't-
Yeah. When I hear that, I think if they can't write a sufficient SSP, isn't that an indication that we should take a step back? I agree that's a cost to them, but I think the risk to humanity is much greater if they're putting out technology that they're not sure what's going to happen with it. So I think that's the bill working as intended. It's unfortunate that there is this externality at all. I would like the externality to be internalized more by the developers so they can do something about it.
Yeah, Greg, if there's no regulation, there's no requirement for an SSP, what do you think is just good practice for these companies before they put out these models?
What you guys are forgetting is that there's already laws about defrauding someone, about crashing computers, about killing anyone. If the models are used for harm, there are already laws to address it. So it's not like this. This is what I'm saying, and this is why I asked Holly point blank, pointing out a law that bans a similar technology, and there isn't one. This is the first time that I know of, unless Holly or someone else pointed it out to me, where there's a law that basically is regulating a technology, basically banning technology, and not the actual harm. This is just it's an open-ended, ambiguous thing that's going to put the kibosh on an industry that's just emerging. That, unlike say a nuclear bomb, which has killed a lot of people, there's not a lot of evidence for harm. And if there is going to be harm, there's already laws for it.
All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. Go ahead. When you interrupt, I'll stop talking.
I get the vibe from you that you don't really believe that much in the promise of AI because you don't seem to think it could be dangerous.
You just said if you want to keep talking.
Yeah. Because I feel that if we really believe that this technology is powerful, of course it's dangerous. It's dual use. It's multi-use. So as we develop new potential, there's going to be potential for good and harm. And I'm concerned about the potential harm.
I develop AI technology every day, and I've looked at the progress, and I would love for all the sci-fi super intelligence to come out. I would love it. I think it'd be great. And I think humanity would benefit from it. But when the airplane was first invented, people thought that people would be living on Mars, right? We'd be living on Mars 40 years ago, and we still haven't got there. And I think what happens is that technology comes up on the S-curve. There's a point of rapid adoption, then it slows down. And if you look at the amount of time between, let's say, GPT 3.5 to 4 to where we are now, it's on the S-curve. It's not progressing faster, right? It is slowing down. And while I would love for this to be just the answer to every question in the universe, I think it's actually a really hard problem. It's going to take a while. I would love it. I love it if it goes faster, but everything I see shows that it's slowing down. It's not getting faster. It's getting slower. The rate of progress, like Sam Altman pumping up GPT-5 like crazy, right? Strawberries, all that kind of crazy stuff. But the reality is there's not much to show for it. If you look at the leaderboard, everyone's kind of crowded around the same kind of performance level. There hasn't been the step function. Now maybe we'll get it. but it's not so easy. That's the other big issue here. It's not so easy.
Okay, I think we're getting close to closing statements here. Greg, is there a point that you can foresee maybe in the future if things seem to be getting more dangerous? Can you describe a potential point where you see yourself starting to endorse regulations? What would that look like?
I think I'm all for regulating the harm, like direct harm. If it's used to impersonate someone or used to defraud someone, absolutely. I'm game for that. But to go after technology with all this kind of ill-defined terms, from fine-tuning to limits to flops on an industry that's just emerging, is basically throwing water like on to the ember, right? It's just starting right now. And it's ridiculous. And it's done by people that really don't know what they're talking about. It's been done by people who really watch too much TV, right? And haven't really used the technology themselves. That's the fundamental problem here. And yeah, we can have regulations, but let's look at when it's actually hurting someone versus trying to forecast some crazy Terminator scenario in the future.
Great. Holly, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so I think we've identified sort of the crux between us, which is it sounds like you don't think that AI, at least in the near term, is going to be very dangerous. And so you're focused more on the benefits we're losing out on by not allowing, by your focus is therefore not getting in the way of innovation with AI because you're not worried, as I am, that there could be very severe harms, which is why I want the kind of regulation that does require people to think ahead. This is very unprecedented, very uniquely powerful technology. And yeah, whereas in many cases, it's a lighter touch is possible where you only prosecute harms, you only prosecute applications that are harmful. In this case, because of the magnitude of harm that I fear and that I think is credible with developing AI, I don't see any signs of AI hitting a wall. Everybody's said that for a very long time with machine learning, that it's hitting a wall and then it speeds up. Scaling just keeps working. So I believe that the potential for danger is so great that it is necessary to look ahead and look at the technology, which I think is the source of the new risk. It's just the incredible amount of power that intelligence exceeding human intelligence is going to bring. The ability to change the world in any direction is going to be immense. And that's scary. And that's something that I think we have no choice but to try to predict and prevent and develop slowly and carefully, because I don't think we'll necessarily have another shot if there is a failure at that level of power. It might be that society is irreparably damaged. It could mean human extinction. And so we really have no choice but to regulate this way.
Okay, Greg, one last question I'm curious about. So you've made it very clear that you're opposed to this regulation and any regulation for now. But let me ask you, if we had to have regulation, because there are a lot of candidate bills going through the system, is my understanding. So it's not just SB 1047. There's a lot of people who want to have some kind of regulation. So my question for you is, how bad is SB 1047 compared to other regulation you can imagine doing? How bad did we screw it up?
I haven't looked at the other ones as closely, so I don't really know. I hear about them, but I don't know about them that much. SB 1047, I looked at a lot. And SB 1047 is a total train wreck. It's flawed in so many different ways. Yeah, I basically just think the only thing about that maybe is okay is like the Cal compute thing, right? That's maybe the only thing about it. But everything else is pretty much totally taken at a dumpster. It just makes no sense. And
can you elaborate what's the Cal compute thing?
Oh, it's basically trying to help provide power for people to build models. I think I've done a lot of startups, and I don't know if you've done startups, but
wasn't that through the FMD? Did that survive the last round of amendments?
I don't know. Did it? I didn't check it out. Did it get killed? I don't know.
I think that was part of forming the new new department, which got axed.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not sure. Actually,
maybe
I
then I'll
haven't thought about that in a while.
Okay. I was trying to think something, but maybe there was anything good about it. Yeah, there's never been a time in humanity where more knowledge was bad, more intelligence was bad. We want the smartest, most intelligent people, most knowledgeable people in the world. And AI allows us to do that. And I think the one thing that people get really confused by is that there's intelligence and then there's agency. So for us, we all have agency and we have intelligence, and they're separate things. People get them confused a lot, right? So the Terminator, right? The Terminator robot, that Terminator robot had a lot of agency. It's also fairly smart as well, but had a lot of agency. Today, if you look at the AI systems, they have zero agency. They're very intelligent, but they have zero agency. And I think that's what needs to be separated. People get confused with the two. And even on the intelligence side, I think the head of Meta's AI has said that GPT-4 is about as smart as his dog, right? And maybe not even, right? It is just getting started. And I'm hoping it will advance. I want it to advance more, but it's not going to advance more. You put the kibosh on it. Put the kibosh on all the R&D, all the research that has to happen to advance it.
I think that the core crux between us is that I'm worried about potentially very powerful technology and potentially very soon. And that makes the kind of regulation that SB 1047 is, that considers harms before they happen. It requires developers to have a plan for ensuring safety, dealing with harms before they happen. I think that's our only option. And I think SB 1047 is a very light touch, high ceiling, first coat of regulation. I think this is my opinion as the PauseAI US executive director, is that this doesn't go nearly far enough, but it's a really good start. I strongly support it. And I urge anyone listening, if there's still time, to call your assembly member, call your California Senate member when it goes to that vote, and to call Governor Newsom's office and let him know that you want this bill to pass.
Great. All right. Thanks, Holly. Let's give the last word to Greg.
Well, first of all, thank you guys both for giving me the forum to chat. I realize you guys don't share my enthusiasm for AI or my viewpoints, but I appreciate it nevertheless. I think if SB 1047 gets enacted, we're going to have to rename Silicon Valley. We call it not Silicon Valley, but Compliance Valley. We're going to have armies of lawyers up and down trying to figure out how to comply with this trade law that's totally ambiguous, that's totally impossible to comply with. And we're going to have to basically, there's going to be a good business for moving companies. So you guys are looking for a new startup idea, maybe a moving company for helping people move out of California. And all the families are going to have to get uprooted, and all the innovation and jobs and prosperity that would have been here in California, that's going to be moving out to other parts of the country. Or perhaps if a country adopts SB 1047, that we were in different countries. And I think it's really sad because while we'll have the safest AI in California, we'll become like the Betamax of AI, right? We'll be safer, but totally irrelevant. We'll be left in the dust. We'll be like the Ottoman Empire. We'll be a footnote in the history book. And I think it's sad because this is where really AI has started, right? It's the birthplace of AI. It's the birthplace of innovation. It's where all the amazing technologies have come out of. And it's so sad that with this Hollywood-inspired Terminator, pre-caught Minority Report narrative, that we're going to be killing this innovation. We're going to be subjecting hundreds, millions of people to live a worse life, a less productive life, a life that's less healthy, less prosperous, like a shorter lifespan. And I can't think of something more dangerous to humanity than making humanity less intelligent, less smart. So I'm hoping that anyone that's listening will do what Holly says, call up your legislator and tell them what their main brainy idea this is and stop this train wreck. And votes are coming up in November. So just remember how people voted, and the people who will vote against innovation, people who vote against California, people who vote against, having innovations and longer lifespans and better drugs and better healthcare. Remember who voted which way and vote appropriately when you vote them in or out. But thank you guys both for giving me the time to chat. And if this passes, I hope you guys are right. But unfortunately, everything I see from this means it's totally the wrong direction for our state.
You can make $1,000 for free if it passes. Because I'll bet you $1,000 you don't move.
All right, we can. All right, yeah. Greg, do you want to bet Holly that if it passes, you'll still stay in California?
I don't know. I haven't. I've been thinking about it. I like the weather here, but would we do something else? Maybe, right? I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say, but I know that companies have already started moving. XAI is probably one of those high-profile companies that we move. So I think that, I don't understand why we want to mess with people's lives, why we want to base decisions on Hollywood. Things are just totally make-believe. I think we want laws that are based on evidence, based on real evidence of harm, not on some fantasy made up make-believe that someone who has too much time on their hands made up, right? It just doesn't make sense. If we want to do that, we should Terminator 5 or whatever. And that's my third turn of time than trying to do fictional writing in a Senate bill.
I want to thank you both. Thanks to Holly. Holly is director of the PauseAI movement in the US, which I myself am part of. So I'm happy to endorse visiting pauseai.info and joining this amazing Discord community. And also, huge respect and huge thanks to Greg. He came up and stood up for his position. It's one that Holly disagrees with. I personally, full transparency, disagree with Greg's position, but he stood up for his beliefs, defended it like a champ. And frankly, that's not something you see often. People in his position, it's all too rare for them to come into the lion's den in a place like Doom Debates or other debate forum and hash this out. It seems like debating is a lost art in our society that I'm personally trying to bring back. So when you're supporting the Doom Debates mission, you're not just supporting talking about Doom, you're also supporting the social infrastructure of having a high quality debate. So thanks again, everybody. And I'll see you guys next time on Doom Debates.